Question. You insist that the followers of the Nembutsu and Zen schools will fall into the hell of incessant suffering. This shows that you have a contentious heart. You yourself are in danger of falling into the realm of the Asuras. Right? This is a common question when it comes to Nichiren scholarship, Nichiren teachings, mentorship from non-Nichiren Buddhists, accusing us and quoting every manner of the sutras. Calm down, everybody's good, right? They take that religious tact. Anyway, so it's been brought up to me many times in my teaching career of over 40 years that I'm a little too critical of other sects, other people, other groups. I don't really single people out. I'm talking about influences, bad teachers, that kind of thing, right? So Nichiren's already displayed all over the place. We just got through a couple of videos about, what bad teachers look like and how you shouldn't reprimand other Buddhists, and that. We hear this all the time, right? So Nichiren is bringing up, okay, let's talk about that. Moreover, this is still the question. It is said in the Peaceful Practices chapter of the Lotus Sutra, he should not delight in speaking of the faults of other people or scriptures or texts. He should not display contempt for other teachers of the law. It is because you are going against this passage in the sutra that you've been abandoned by the universal, forces, and this is why you're getting persecuted, blah, 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 blah. Is it not? So you have to be very careful of the wording here. And again, I remind you, these are translations, so how accurately they get the nuances of the language. But you get the point, right? So here's Nichiren's answer. Great Concentration and Insight says, quote, there are two ways to spread the Buddha's teachings. The first is called Shoju, and the second is called Shakubuku. When the Peaceful Practices chapter says that one should not speak of the shortcomings of others, it is referring to the Shoju method, right? But when the Nirvana Sutra says that one should carry swords and staves or that one should cut off their heads, it is referring to the Shakubuku method. They differ in approach in that one is lenient and the other severe, but they both bring benefit. Now, he'll continue here, but I have pointed this out many times before. There's a difference between reprimanding somebody who doesn't know anything about Buddhism. That's really counterproductive. I would agree with that. It's not the way to go. But if you're dealing with others who pretend or portend expressly to be propagators of Buddhism, or at very least practitioners of Buddhism, and they are following incorrect practices, incorrect teachings, then it's our responsibility. It's our parental responsibility, right? Parents, teachers, sovereigns. That's our three responsibilities as Buddhists. We have to correct our child. Do not run across the street. Look both ways. Make sure you understand. Practice correctly. Otherwise, you're crapping all over that which you profess to be practicing. That has to be corrected. Shakubuku. You want to find out about Buddhism? You don't really know. You're making mistakes about what it means. You don't understand what this concept is. Let me help you. Let's chant together and let's discuss it and let's get clearer and clearer together on the path toward enlightenment. Shoju. Some people will argue this stuff for the sake of argument. Ego. That doesn't belong. Look at this objectively, and it's very clear. All right, we'll continue with Nichiren's answer as soon as I welcome you here. Welcome new subscribers. Welcome those of you who've been here for a long time, and all of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you mainly for your practice. your courageous efforts for awakening. So thank you. My name is Sylvain, or Sylvain. I'm a practicing monk, have been for decades, dedicated my life to the correct practice of Shakyamuni's teachings of self-enlightenment. Using as my guide the great scholar Nichiren, Bodhisattva Nichiren, in his elucidations and his model of practice for this era that we find ourselves in, of great distraction, right? Thank you, Nichiren. So thank you for your practice. Thank you for being here. Please, if you'll take a moment to like and subscribe, it helps the channel grow on YouTube. I don't know how the what do you call it? The notification bell. I don't know if that affects it as well. But I do know likes and subscriptions mean a whole lot to making our presence more known. And that, to me, is a bodhisattva effort, right? Believe me, I haven't gotten a penny from YouTube yet, so it's not about money. It's about propagation, yeah? And when it comes to the money thing, many of you are buying the e-books, the downloads from threefoldlotus.com. The links are all over the video. Or the bookstore, lulu.com, if you like print books, as well as Patreon and PayPal. There are several ways to support, and deeply, deeply appreciate that support. It's very much necessary to keep this going, yeah? Okay, so let's go on. Nichiren continues to quote Tendai's writing on great concentration and insight, states, quote, "With regard to the two ways of spreading the Buddha's teachings, the passage from the Nirvana Sutra, Carry Swords and Staves, is found in the third volume where it says, quote, defenders of the correct teaching need not observe the 5 precepts or practice the rules of proper behavior. This is more important. Rather, they should carry knives and swords, bows and arrows, halberds and lances." And later on in the sutra tells of King Senyo, who put to death those who slandered the correct teaching. I don't know if I'd go that far today, but point taken, right? It also mentions how the new physician, explaining that the medicine from milk prescribed by the old physician was dangerous, forbade its usage, saying, "If anyone takes any more of this medicine, he shall have his head cut off." These passages also demonstrate how the method of Shakubuku should be applied to persons who go against the law. That's always the foundational thing here, the law, right? All the sutras and treatises deal with one or the other of these two methods, end quote. Right? There are those who profess to be teaching a law, but they're not teaching Myoho Renge-kyo. They're not teaching the law of the engine of life, of self-realizing and observing the engine of life. They're distracted, using other methods and icons and magic words and all of this. And again, I've got so many videos on this channel about how Myoho Renge-kyo is not magic words. It's not even words, right? They're concepts. They're an amalgam, right? I know I get distracted and I want to dig into that, but I've done so many videos on it. Use the search on the homepage of this channel on YouTube, and not the top search, but the one in the middle of the page, and look up Myoho Renge-kyo. You'll get a results set of all sorts of videos about that. All right, so we're coming to something I bolded in the book here. By the way, reminder, we're reading from a composite book that I put together, again, available as an ebook, on because there's so much confusion on what the mandala is versus what the Gohonzon is. that I put together a grouping of Nichiren's writings. We're in a thesis right now, The Opening of the Eyes. So this is a long one, but there's a lot of them in here, and we have a few others after we finish this one, exploring the concepts. And I'm wanting to make clear for all of us in our Sangha the difference and identify Mandala versus Gohonzon. Yeah. So right now, what he's talking about, these attitudes and how we practice and how we contend with opposing ways of teachings that are not leading to the law, right? Follow the law, not the person, right? All of these different aspects of our attitude and intent, they're all in service of opening this Gohonzon. This is not about Mandala, it's about Gohonzon. He talks about Mandala and some of the others very specifically, and how he's constructed the Mandala, also even within this document. But understand, even though he's not saying this is Gohonzon, his whole mission is about this portal, this opening in the mind, the Buddhahood, the door to experiencing Buddha-ness. Yes? That is Gohonzon. So we'll go a little further here, and this will be exciting. So the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra reads, another Tendai document, question. The Nirvana Sutra clearly states that one should associate closely with the ruler, bearing bows and arrows and helping overthrow evil persons. And yet, the Peaceful Practices chapter of the Lotus Sutra says that one should stay away from persons in power and should behave with humility and loving kindness. Seems contradictory, right? But you got to pay attention to the context. There seems to be a major contradiction between the sternness of one approach and the gentleness of the other. Why should they differ so? Answer. The Nirvana Sutra speaks mostly about the Shakubuku approach, but it also mentions dwelling in the state where one looks on all living beings as one's own children. Could it say so if it did not have the Shoju approach? The Lotus Sutra is mainly concerned with the Shoju approach, as in the Peaceful Practices chapter. But in the Dharani chapter, there is also the curse on those who trouble the preachers of the law, that says that they will have their heads split into 7 pieces, right? We've read that before. Could it say so if it did not have the Shakubuku approach? Both sutras employ one or the other of the two methods depending upon the context. The method chosen should be that which accords with the time. And that doesn't just mean Mappo, this time. I mean, Buddhism talks a lot about time, and I've talked a lot about time as a very fluid and perceptive thing. It's something that, in many ways, we create time. But the time he's talking about here is situational time, right? There are times, even amongst ourselves, when we'll maintain a false idea without really knowing why. We just are stuck. And a good friend, another term we come across a lot in Buddhism, will endeavor to unstick us, right? Well, you say this, but what do you really mean? It seems to contradict this. And by dialogue, which is why Sangha is important, we'll figure it out on our own eventually, but, with chanting and enlivening our Buddha mind, our Gohonzon, right? We'll figure it out. But having others to bounce ideas back and forth, to investigate, to challenge things, we can gain insights much more quickly, right? And amongst us, that can be, for a few moments, Shakubuku, because I don't want to, what do you mean I'm not, are you saying I'm wrong, right? That ego thing. And then suddenly you have an insight and you go, oh my goodness, what a good friend Shoju. Ah, nurturing. You've helped me. Oh man, how can I thank you? Let's go chant, yeah? So it doesn't have to be a way of life. It's situational. Sometimes it's called for. It's actually necessary. It's a very loving kindness, like if somebody were your only child, right? It would be hard to tolerate bad behavior from your only child. Now, that doesn't mean punish them, right? The punishment is built in. If you make negative causes, you will incur some sort of suffering from it, even though you don't know you've made a bad cause. But friends can help you see causes that you're making that are not life-affirming, that are misleading you. They're misleading you from what? What is always the goal in Buddhism? To stay focused on awakening our Buddha mind, right? That's the whole gig, as it were. He continues. The annotations on the Nirvana Sutra states, quote, when monks or laymen are defending the law, the most important thing is for them to adopt the proper basic mental attitude. And we're not saying that your attitude, because you know Myoho Renge Kyo and you know how to chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, it doesn't mean that your proper mental attitude is one of arrogance or superiority or anything like that. It's one of deep reverence for truth. They should disregard external details, stick to the principles, and in this way spread the teachings of the Nirvana Sutra. Therefore, it says that defenders of the correct teaching need not abide by petty regulations. Right? This happens a lot. I've said this a lot about organizations. The first imperative of an organization is what? Always what? No matter what they say, the first imperative of an organization isn't the law. It isn't the proper practice. It's the organization. So right off the bat, it's not really built to practice correctly. It's a conundrum, isn't it? That's why our independent practice is absolutely perfectly suited to this era, to this time. As Nichiren says, emulate my life, emulate my practice, emulate, do as I do. And that is why it says they need not practice the rules of proper behavior. That doesn't unleash you and say, okay, now you can be an asshole all day long. It's not at all, right? What was that? Everything working? Okay. Saw a flash on the computer. Made me nervous. Sorry. In past times, the age was peaceful, and the law spread throughout the country. At that time, it was proper to observe the precepts and not to carry staves or be on guard. It wasn't necessary. But now the age is perilous and the law is overshadowed, right? Tremendous distractions taking us away from our focus of enlightenment. So many other things to be involved with, engaged in. Therefore, it is proper to carry staves and to disregard the precepts. So all of those rules of, ritual and behavior that were outlined for monks in monasteries and amongst the public and so forth, that suited an earlier time, but it's no longer relevant. It wouldn't work. More than ever, this era that you and I live in is a person-to-person, individual, independent practice. And as an independent, you have to be mentally on guard for friends, relatives, associates, and strangers to constantly be looking to manipulate your convictions for their purposes. That's the world we live in now. So you have to constantly be mentally astute. It doesn't mean walk around with a katana to behead people, but in your strength of conviction, in your thoughts and your understanding of the law, Myoho Renge Kyo, the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha and the Lotus Sutra, you need to be well and truly solid. And as I've said before, the most solid thing you can do is rely on the law, which means chant. Get people to chant. If you're ever confronted with anything, don't try to intellectually beat them. That's your ego. You may know much more than they do, but that will not convince them. Chant. Chant with them. Open that Gohonzon door in their minds, even if they don't understand what it is, so that their minds will be open to the law. Not your words, the law. That's critical to know and understand. If both the past and the present were perilous times, then it would be proper to carry staves in both periods. And if both past and present were peaceful times, then it would be proper to observe the precepts in both of them. You should let your choices be fitting and never adhere solely to one or the other. Well, there it is, right? There are times when we are surrounded by thwarted, whether it's ego or ignorance or whatever, or other Buddhists who wish to dissuade us from our practice. And there are times when we're around people who are actually curious and want to hear from us what true practice, correct practice of the Lotus Sutra is. What does Nichiren really say about this? It's never one way or the other. It's always potential for both. And the answer is always Myoho Renge Kyo, yeah? It's very straightforward. It's something we need to constantly remind ourselves of, because it's easy to forget, especially if you find yourselves in the midst of argumentation, yeah? I suppose the learned monks of the time think it is only natural that one should have doubts about this. Therefore, no matter how I explain and try to persuade my own disciples, they still cannot seem to overcome their doubts, but behave like ichantikas, or persons of incorrigible disbelief. Therefore, I have quoted these passages of explanation from Tendai and Miaolo and others in order to silence their ungrounded criticisms. These two methods of Shoju and Shakubuku are like water and fire. Fire hates water. Water detests fire. The practitioner of Shoju laughs with scorn at Shakubuku. The practitioner of Shakubuku laments at the thoughts of Shoju. When the country is full of evil people without wisdom, then Shoju is the primary method to be applied. Right? We live in a time now where the cultures and there's wars all over the world. There's impending war all over the world. There's a lot of ego, violence, separated sides being taken. Everything's a side now. You can't choose a breakfast cereal without taking sides, right? That's the world we live in right now. So the least, how should I say it? The method for propagation and practice on the tip of your tongue should be Shoju, calming, right? Calming, considered, nurturing, chant, right? If you walk around with a sword challenging everyone, then you're just going to fall into the din. You're going to be another war. That's not productive. Shakubuku doesn't work. Not in that situation, right? When the country is full of evil people without wisdom, then Shoju is the primary method to be applied, as described in the Peaceful Practices chapter. But at a time when there are many people of perverse views who slander the law, then Shakubuku should come in first, as described in the Never Disparaging chapter. That's an interesting chapter to quote. Never Disparaging chapter. See how important context is? So what he's talking about here isn't just the clueless masses. He's talking about targeted people who are practicing incorrectly, teaching incorrectly, Buddhists who are, for whatever reason, misled, going down a path that is disparaging to the law. But also in the never disparaging chapter, always know in your rebuke of bad teachers that they are Buddhists, that they do have the potential for enlightenment, Gohonzon, Buddha-ness. So, however stern or rebuking you are, it should always be done like a parent to a child, with love. Even if it gets ugly. Damn it, listen to me. You may have to get very stern. But my suggestion to you, be stern about chanting with them. Chant with them and then read like part of this Gosho. Hash it out. Let them nurture their potential to understand, to see clearly. That may sound like Shoju, and it may turn into Shoju. But the Shakubuku part is your strength of conviction. I will show you the way. You will find the way through my encouragement and stalwart demand that you find the proper way. Not, I'm going to force this down your throat. That's not Shakubuku. Right? This is a very important discussion because a lot of confusion about this, yeah? It is like using cold water to cool yourself off in hot weather, or longing for a fire when the weather turns cold. Grass and trees are kindred to the sun. They suffer in the cold moonlight. Bodies of water are followers of the moon. They lose their true nature when the hot weather comes. In the latter day of the law, however, both Shoju and Shakubuku are to be used. Wham! In Nichiren's own words. This is because there are two kinds of countries, the country that is passively evil and the kind that actively seeks to destroy the law. Some are misled and just act out of ignorance. Others take on the mantle of turning Buddhism into corporate power. And everything in between, really. We must consider carefully to which category Japan at the present time belongs. So he's talking about countries here, but with the population of Earth today, it could easily be talking about cities, towns, your circle of friends, the people in our environs. Question. If one applies the Shakubuku method at a time when the Shoju method would be appropriate, or Shoju at a time when Shakubuku would be appropriate, is there any merit to be gained? There's the obvious question, right? What if we're too stupid to figure out which one to choose? Or what if we just make a mistake because we're on a roll and we're using Shakubuku when we've already beat our opponent too hard? They need to be nurtured and we miss that opportunity. Are we guilty of causing harm? That's the real question, right? Answer. The Nirvana Sutra says, quote, Bodhisattva Kashyapa addressed the Buddha saying, the Dharma body of the thus come one is as indestructible as a diamond, but I do not yet understand the means by which you acquired it? Would you tell me?" The Buddha replied, "Kashyapa, it is because I was a defender of the correct teaching that I have been able to attain this diamond-like body. Kashyapa, because in the past I devoted myself to the correct teaching, I have been able to achieve this diamond-like body that abides forever and is never destroyed. Good man, defenders of the correct teachings need not observe the 5 precepts or practice the rules of proper behavior. Rather, they should carry knives and swords, bows and arrows." So what you take that literally, you're going to get confused. As I said earlier, this is a statement about attitude and intent. Always rely on that analysis, and this will clear up immediately for you. The body like a diamond. Does he really have a body like a diamond? Is this a cartoon we're talking about? That if you try to stab him, you break your sword, bink, oh, look, he's like a diamond. No, we're talking about a mental attitude, unassailable, rock solid. Right? Doesn't that make sense? The monks whom you are speaking of preach various teachings, but still they're not able to utter the lion's roar, so on and so forth. Nor are they able to refute and convert evil persons who go against the correct teaching. Right? They're using words and they're not swaying the misled, the bad teachers, right? Monks of this kind can bring no benefit either to themselves or the populace. You should realize that they are in fact shirkers and idlers. They're more like Ichantikas because they believe that their words are more meaningful than the law. Again, this is chant with them so that they can hear the truth for themselves. Never believe that you're so clever that you can push enlightenment onto somebody else. It's not possible. But the ego thinks it is, yeah? Though they are careful in observing the precepts and maintaining spotless conduct for themselves, you should realize that they cannot achieve anything because they rely on the person, not the law. What are you talking about? They rely on their own person, the ego. Oh, we hadn't thought about that. It's not about not following a person. Yes, it is. But it's being careful not to follow your person. That's more difficult to see. Those who break the precepts upon listening to his preaching are all enraged to the point where they attack him. This preacher of the law, though he may in the end lose his life, is still worthy of being called a person who observes the precepts and brings benefit to both himself and others. In the passage from on the Nirvana Sutra, quoted earlier, Chang'an says, quote, "You should let your choices be fitting and never adhere solely to one or the other," end quote. And Tendai, as we've seen, declared that the chosen method should be that which accords with the time. What's suited? How do I know what's suited? Is the original question is really asking that. If it is not, you will be like someone who plants seeds at the end of autumn. Though you may carefully tend the field, you're not likely to have a harvest of any rice or grain, right? So we often do this, right? Humans. We find one way that works for us, and we want to impose that way on everyone else, thinking that eventually it will work. But we're not being like a parent and child. We're not understanding that people have their own way of discovering their path to Buddhahood. You can't enforce your path on others. You can share it. Maybe it's inspiring. Maybe there's a lesson in it. But attitude and intent. If you're sharing your story with the attitude that they need to emulate it or get it because of your wonderful experience, that's your ego, my friend. Chant with them. Get them to chant. Then discuss some of these teachings with them. Let them come to their own aha. Oh, I think I get it. You will never feel more warmth and what to call it. It's like your Buddha nature will swell inside of you, envelop you in just brilliance. When you hear a friend or somebody you're discussing with Buddhism say things to you that, oh, it's like this and this. It's like this is where it is. The law. It'll silence you. You'll just be in awe. You'll never feel better than that. I guarantee you. That is true bodhisattva work. It's humbling. If you're frustrated at the end of a conversation, then you've wasted your breath. You should end every session with somebody that you're working with, chanting together with a sensation of amazement. Thank your Gohonzon for affording you that vision of Buddha-ness. How do we do that? That's why we have a Butsudan and a Mandala. Amo myo renge kyo. You hear me? During the Kenin era, Nichiren continues, 1201 to 1204, two men came to prominence, Honen and Dainichi, who spread the teachings of the Nembutsu and the Zen schools, respectively. Honen denied the worth of the Lotus Sutra. Now that the world has entered the latter day of the law, saying that, quote, not a single person has ever attained Buddhahood through that sutra, and that not even one person in 1,000 can be saved by its teachings. That's pretty hardcore, yeah? Dainichi, for his part, claimed that the true teachings of Buddhism had been transmitted apart from the sutras. That the very instantiator of Buddhism, Shakyamuni, well, he didn't know Buddhism. We got, real Buddhism comes from this other guy. These two doctrines have now spread throughout the entire country. The learned monks of the Tendai and True Word schools fawn on the lay supporters of the Nembutsu and Zen schools the way a dog wags its tail before its master, or fears them the way a mouse fears a cat. That's all about egotistic relations, right? Persons. It's not about the law. These men enter the service of the ruler and military leader, where they preach in such a way as to bring about the destruction of the Buddhist law and ruin of the country. These Tendai and True Word leaders, in their present existence, will fall into the realm of hungry spirits and will find themselves in the Avicii hell. Even if they retire to the mountain forests and engage intensely in meditation on the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment of life, or retire to a quiet spot and concentrate on the three mysteries of body, mouth, and mind, if they do not understand the time or the people's capacity and perceive which of the two methods, Shoju or Shakubuku, is appropriate, then they can never free themselves from the suffering of birth and death, moment to moment to moment to moment. They'll be trapped in samsara, the hell of incessant suffering, because it's all about attachments, attitudes about things, ownership, persons. It's exactly what we're trying to escape from, liberate ourselves from. That attachment, that ownership. That's the problem. They miss it. Question: when you berate the followers of the Nembutsu and Zen schools and arouse their enmity, what merit does that bring? Right? You just did it again, Nichiren. Yeah, have you not been paying attention? He just switched modes to Shakubuku because it's necessary. when Nichiren rails against these people, how many letters, treatises have we read where he always follows that up with quotes from sutras, quotes from all over Buddhist scholarship, right? He doesn't do it, he doesn't say, call them names. He directs their attention to correcting their behavior. Shakubuku. Answer. The Nirvana Sutra says, quote, if even a good monk sees someone destroying the teaching and disregards him, failing to reproach him, not as a person, as somebody who is practicing incorrectly, to oust him or to punish him for his offense, then you should realize that that monk is betraying the Buddha's teachings. See, it's not enough to be focused on your own enlightenment. That's very limited. It's your experience alone. Buddha-ness is about humanity, the whole, not just humanity, the whole of life. If all you're doing is polishing your experience of life, how complete is that when everything in your environment is mirroring your experience of life? You have to polish your environment as well. Otherwise, how complete is your experience? This too makes perfect sense, doesn't it? But if he ousts the destroyer of the law, or reproaches him, or punishes him, you don't talk about that here. You want to have a discussion privately, I'll tell you, we'll have that. But you don't come here in this group and start spouting this poison. You don't know what you're talking about. Get out of here. Totally appropriate. I've done it several times on this very channel. YouTube, the internet, social media. There's always going to be people with ugly agendas. This is a nurturing place. This is a place for encouragement and understanding and learning. I don't have time for somebody. If they want to contact me directly, I won't shy away from a discussion, no matter how vehement it might get, but not with our crew, with our Sangha, right? I haven't done it much, but I had to do with a few people. Hey, that's Namo Myo Renge Kyo. That's this era, isn't it? Then he is my disciple and a true voice hearer. Voice hearer. What is that? Somebody who perceives the true teaching, the law, the engine of life. Chang'an comments on this as follows, quote, one who destroys or brings confusion to the Buddha's teachings is betraying them. So it's not just destruction. If you bring about confusion, betraying the teachings of Shakyamuni. If one befriends another person but lacks the mercy to correct him, one is in fact his enemy. Right? You can't call yourself a friend if you tolerate, well, you know, he's just that way. Oh, she likes to talk a good game, but, you know, she's a good person. You're making excuses for somebody. You're not in their mind. You don't know what they're actually thinking. If you don't endeavor to correct them, to nurture their Buddha-ness, then you're not really their friend. And you're opening a door to your own influence, right? If your friend is a petty thief, over time you'll start to condone, well, he's a petty thief. Every now and again I steal a piece of bubble gum. What does it hurt? What it hurts is your Buddha-ness. You're allowing that to fester and influence you. Correct your friend's behavior, polish your own. Now you're practicing Buddhism. Do you see? But one who reprimands and corrects an offender is a voice hearer who defends the Buddha's teachings, a true disciple of the Buddha. And that may be a good tip on how to maintain and know one's own behavior. Are you able to look at yourself in the face, in the mind, as a protector and defender of Shakyamuni Buddha, who's right there next to you? Are you living up to that, or are you betraying that? For yourself, right? One who rids the offender of evil is acting as his parent. There it is again. Those who reproach offenders are disciples of the Buddha, but those who do not oust offenders are betraying the Buddha's teachings, right? You're not just sweeping it under the rug. You're committing a betrayal. This reflects on your life condition. If we examine the Treasure Tower chapter of the Lotus Sutra, we find Shakyamuni Buddha, many treasures Buddha, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions who are emanations of Shakyamuni Buddha gathering together. And why? As the sutra itself says, quote, each, so on and so forth, has come to this place on purpose to make certain the law will long endure. Shakyamuni, many treasures, and the other Buddhas intended to ensure the future propagation of the Lotus Sutra so that it can be made available to all the children of the Buddha in times to come. Always base your acts on the law of life, the engine of life. We may surmise from this that their concern and compassion are even greater than those of a father and mother who see their only child inflicted with great suffering. Honen, however, shows not the least concern about their compassion, but would tightly shut the gates of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law so that no one would have access to it. Like a person who tricks a demented child into throwing away treasure, he tries to induce people to discard the Lotus Sutra, and a shameless thing to do indeed. If someone is about to kill your father and mother, shouldn't you try to warn them? If a bad son who is insane with drink is threatening to kill his father and mother, shouldn't you try to stop him? If some evil person is about to set fire to the temples and pagodas, shouldn't you try to stop him? Right? It's just common sense, yeah? If your only child is gravely ill, shouldn't you try to cure him or her with moxibustion treatment or whatever? To fail to do so is to act like those people who see but do not try to put a stop to the Zen and Nembutsu followers in Japan. Why do you condone this? As Chang'an says, if one befriends another person but lacks the mercy to correct him, one is in fact his enemy. I'm going to stop there. We'll continue the next paragraph. I, Nichiren, am sovereign teacher and father, mother to all the people of Japan, but we'll let that begin the next video. I hope I'm helping to clear this up for you. It's not something you may get many aha moments about this, but I think it bears reinvestigation, rereading from time to time, because in our world today, we get slowly pushed and swayed into certain ways of thinking that every now and again, when we read something this strongly worded, this clear, at least I think it's clear, maybe you can extract from it a few sentences that go, that's where I get it, right there. So take it out, keep it, make a bookmark out of it, whatever. However you learn things. I know people who will take quotes like that and write them out longhand and put them on their altar so that every time they come to Butsudan, oh yeah, that gives me motivation to open my Gohonzon mind, yeah? That's great. Anything you can do that helps you to inculcate this conviction, this constantly being on the forefront of your thinking. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you so much for your efforts, for your practice, for your study. It's so important to our own enlightenment, yeah? Thank you for your support. Don't forget, like, subscribe. If you can, support by buying books, ebooks, the whole thing. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I'm in your debt, and I'm supremely grateful for your practice and the opportunity for me to continue to embolden and empower my practice. Thank you. I'll see you in the next one. Please take care of your health, right? Be kind, and I'll see you very soon. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Bye for now.